Hi there guys, and welcome to another episode of the Cover Zero Show with me, your host Simon Conboy. Today's episode is another game preview. This episode will be focusing on the matchup between the Tampa Bay Buccaneers heading to Buffalo to take on the Bills. This has the real feeling of a must-win game for the Bucs at 2-3. Similarly for the Bills, it's a very tight race in the AFC East right now. Only one game between all the teams in that division. Not too much in it in the NFC South either. It's a very clustered group of teams this season at this stage. Not a lot of teams managing to separate themselves from the pack. So as always, I'm going to go through the key matchups, both of the lineups for the most part, how they match up against one another, and how I expect both teams to attack this game, and how I expect to see things end up. Going to go through a little bit of the injury report first, though I feel like it's a pretty significant one this week. Of course, Tampa, the main concern being quarterback Jameis Winston hurting his shoulder last week. Sounds to me like he's going to play. Apparently, they've probably practiced by now. Leading the first team in practice today. If he can go, obviously that should be a big boost for this team. It looks like Quan Alexander's going to be back, having not played since week 1. That's huge for this team. As I mentioned in last week's game review, this defence last year was awful without him. They've been pretty poor for the most part without him this year. So I think getting him back is integral for having this group play consistently. Levante David limited. I expect to see him play. Other than that, it looks like the majority of the Bucs, whilst you look at the injury report and the defence continues to look like the walking wounded, most of these guys are playing through nagging injuries. As for the Bills, they've got some big news. Jordan Matthews looks like he's potentially going to play this weekend. They absolutely need him. One of the key reasons I was pretty confident the Bucs have a good chance in this one was him missing. Charles Clay, he's not playing. It just leaves a real lack of proven talent at the receiver position for this team. And really, when you're playing the Bucs, you want a couple of decent receivers. Should be enough against a struggling secondary. Cordy Glenn was fully available to practice as well, which is big. The offensive line, I think, needs to be humming for that team to be able to do what it wants to offensively. So in terms of the matchups, I'm going to go through the matchup on the Bills' offensive side, because I think that's probably what's going to determine this game. Tyrod Taylor's having a season pretty similar to what he's had in the past. I think at this stage we can probably say, whilst he's still a bit of an enigma in terms of his style of play, we know what he is at this point. He's a guy who's going to play safe football, not turn the ball over too much, still doesn't seem to like using the middle of the field too often, and he's going to throw some deep balls, whether they're strikes or not, often determines their passing yardage. He either hits a couple and his numbers look good, or he doesn't and his numbers look pretty mediocre. But doesn't give the other team too many easy opportunities. He's done a fantastic job of that, and it's still a strange quarterback to watch, but you'd have to say he's probably an average NFL QB at this stage at worst. If only he had the supporting cast at the receiver position, it'd be easier to get a gauge of where he is. That to me is the problem. Zay Jones has had some difficulties holding on to the ball, it would be safe to say, at this stage of his career. If Jordan Matthews is back, how healthy he is, you'd have to think will be a factor. If so, it gives them a legitimate outside threat. Beyond that, there's not a lot of depth at the position. Brandon Tate and Andre Holmes are two guys who've been bouncing around the league, but I don't think they'll strike fear into the hearts of anybody. The offensive line's been playing well. It's Cordy Glenn and Richie Incognito on the left-hand side are really the strength of this group. Eric Wood's a fine centre as well. If the Bucs are going to be able to manipulate anything, it'll be that right-hand side, which isn't quite as strong, but they have been playing to a pretty high level. With Charles Clay out, Nick O'Leary, the former Seminole, will be at tight end. I think he can be a reasonable short yardage receiver, but I wouldn't expect to see him stretching the field. And of course, public enemy number one for the Buccaneers this week is going to be LaShawn McCoy, as he will when he's playing anybody on a weekly basis. He is the star of this offense. He's not had a particularly good season in terms of statistics, but he's playing pretty well. He's doing a better job and he's always been better running up the gut than I think people give him credit for because of the style of back he is. You see him as an elusive, outside the tackles kind of guy, but he's always been effective running up the middle, and I think this year he's been smarter with it and not necessarily looking to pop things, just try and keep this offense ticking along, and he's done that pretty well behind a line that's doing a very good job in the run game. Teams have been focusing on him heavily, the numbers haven't been there, the breakout runs haven't been there, but he's not playing badly, and of course he's a perennial threat in the receiving game. I expect to see him utilise him in the receiving game heavily in this one, and as it is an issue the Buccaneers have had, is covering guys out of the backfield this season. On the defensive side for the Bucs, I mean, it's sporadic play at just about every position. The secondary's been pretty consistently torched. I think if the Bills are going to do anything, they'll probably just avoid Brent Grimes' general direction. The Buccaneers play a lot of zone, but teams have been kind of avoiding that area, because if there's a guy who's likely to make a play in this secondary, it's him. I expect to see Vernon Hargreaves probably getting picked on. If Matthews does play, which I suspect he will, they'll probably try and create that matchup wherever possible and have Matthews go to work underneath Hargreaves, who will probably continue with his incredibly infuriating style of very soft zone defense, which has been my primary critique of this Buccaneers team. They are showing teams far too much respect in the secondary. They need to clamp that down this week. The defensive line, offensive line matchup, I'm really looking forward to watching. The play hasn't been to the standard I expected. Gerald McCoy has been exceptional this year. Don't let the lack of sack numbers fool you. He is having as disruptive a season as he's had in his very, very good career. Chris Baker has been spotty. He's not offering much pass rush, which I didn't necessarily expect to. Between the two of them, they'll make some plays in this one, I suspect. The edge rush, this has been the big issue. I mean, Ayers and Spence have both been banged up. Ayers has played well in a couple of games, not so well in others. Spence has flashes, but is struggling to put things together consistently, and William Golson is exactly what we suspected. I think they'll be able to do a reasonable job containing this offense into the middle, unless they have breakdowns like last week, but hopefully not for that for them, because that was some atrocious run defense they played last week. Levante David played pretty well last week. If they do indeed have Quan Alexander back, I think that's huge, and I think it gives this Buccaneers defense a massive boost and a bit of an edge. They have a lot of speed. Kendall Beckwith has played well, but he doesn't offer that over the middle, and whilst I think he did a valiant job as a rookie, he's not the most athletic, particularly when you compare him to Levante and Quan. I think he'll just offer so much more to this team. The secondary position remains very much in flux, a kind of rotation. I think Justin Evans may, outside of one horrific play last week, have done enough to start seeing more snaps. I think between him and TJ Ward and Chris Conte, you'll kind of see that rotation continue. No one's really stood out amongst that pack, which has kind of struggled, frankly, for the most part this season. In terms of the way I expect to see this matchup go, things will be dictated, I feel, by how the Buccaneers decide to line up. In all likelihood, you've got to expect them to play the run pretty aggressively, although it's not been something that they've looked to do too often. But when you play this Bills team, I mean, LaShawn McCoy, that's got to be the focus, particularly with Charles Clay out. I really do think that's huge. The Bucs have struggled with tight ends at times this year. Expect to see the four-man line just trying to play contain this week. I think there will be a real focal point, not just because of it's the Bills, but also with the gashing they had last week. I expect to see far more aggressive play from the corners and more disciplined play from the ends, because they were both an issue. If Quan Alexander's there, him and Levante are going to be the guys that are going to be relied upon to track LaShawn McCoy, hit those holes and get into the backfield. You really don't want to get him into the second level where he's got a head of steam and can make guys miss. If you're the Bills, I think you try and start with that interior run game, because teams have had success running up the gut and pop into the outside against the Buccaneers all year, where that contain has been an issue. The Bucs have to try and correct that. If they can't, LaShawn McCoy is going to have a huge game and the entire offense will be able to run off of that. I think Tyrod Taylor's going to have to use his legs in this one. Buccaneers have struggled to get to the quarterback. I think they're going to continue to play pretty soft in their zones and not be too creative. I think he'll have opportunities to make some plays. I think they'll take advantage of that with some rollout type plays, especially if they are getting that success off the inside run game. I think that will be big for them, particularly in obvious passing situations. The Bucs tend not to blitz too often, and I expect to see these receivers playing very short. The Bucs have been more than happy to let teams have stuff underneath. The Bills will have to try and take that. It doesn't really fit Tyrod Taylor's MO, particularly going over the middle of the field, but that's where teams have had success against this Buccaneers team. Whether that's something the Bills will adjust in, I'm not sure. Otherwise, going deep down the field, don't want to go near Grimes. He's great at playing the deep ball, so that's where you'd see Vernon Hargreaves and the safeties being picked on. Without Charles Clay, I don't know if they've got the ability to do that at the tight end position. But Zay Jones, he could have a big impact in this one. But I really feel the Bills have to get the short passing game going, the run game going, get this Buccaneers team flowing and manipulated, because there is a lot of speed on this Buccaneers defence. And if they can keep things shored up in the blocking game, I'm expecting to see a lot of heavy sets from this team. I expect him trying to overpower Tampa with some power type runs, some dive type runs, try and get those tackles coming up the field, getting past them and getting to the second level. It's going to be an interesting matchup for sure. I think that front four versus that front five is going to be absolutely key. Gerald McCoy versus Richie Incognito should be a good battle. Both players playing very, very well thus far this year. As mentioned with the Bucs, in terms of the follow-up to that game plan, keep contained. That has to be the focus. And I think they've got to be just a little bit more creative. With Quan Alexander back, I think they've got that opportunity now. Maybe mix in a few blitzes here or there, because they need to find a way to generate more consistent heat and get some more backfield penetration. It's just not been happening for them the last couple of weeks, and frankly things have looked very easy for quarterbacks back there, in spite of the fact there's been a bit more pressure from this front four. On the other side of the ball, the Buccaneer offense, frankly I don't think it looks much different with Winston or Fitzpatrick. This team, I've been complaining, I feel Dirk Cutter and co have shown a bit of a stubbornness in terms of the way they start games. Really can't afford to continue with these slow starts. I feel like this Bills team is one where if this Bucs team can get off to a fast start, they're looking good. This Bills team is not going to put up points in bunches. The Bucs do have that capability, you'd have to think. They've just not shown it, particularly this year. But if Jameis is there, obviously a big help. A better athlete with a bigger arm and a lot more reps in the offense at this point. But Fitzpatrick showed enough last week. He can probably steady the ship. Probably not a huge drop off at this point. Probably more consistent than Winston. That's saying something, because Fitzpatrick is also a very up and down player, as his career has demonstrated. But either way, whoever they have, they've got a tough matchup throwing the ball. This Bills secondary has been absolutely fantastic. 3 new players to the team. Jordan Poyer has been exceptional. Him and Mike Hyde have been one of the best safety pairings in the league this year. I lauded the signing of Mike Hyde. I love his versatility. I think he was always an underrated player in Green Bay, and he's once again playing very, very well. They're mixing the two of them up, being used in all kinds of ways. They're both playing at a high level. Tre'Davious White, the rookie, has been stellar. Looks like the best corner of the rookie class. Really enjoying him. EJ Gaines in the trade. He's also been playing at a pretty solid level. One of the best performing secondaries thus far this year. As a whole, this defence is playing at a high level. The linebacking crew of pretty much no names for the most part. Lorenzo Alexander playing quite well again. Preston Brown as well. They're doing a good job. But the strength of this group really on paper is this front four. They've been solid. I really feel the strength has been the secondary. They've done a great job mixing up blitzes, which I wouldn't have expected with the way they line up this year. But they have been pretty aggressive, particularly with stopping the run. More than happy to run blitz this year. I think a part of that being the confidence they've got in those guys on the back end at this stage. Jerry Hughes is still a good speed rush threat. Bit lightweight against the run for my liking, but the two in the middle do a really good job stopping that, particularly with the way the scheme is being used this year. They're tough to run up the gut on. And Shaq Lawson, jury's still out. Haven't seen a huge amount from him at this point in his career, but still early. But this group could potentially generate a fair bit of pressure. The Buccaneers' offensive line has been okay the last couple of weeks. The team is still struggling with the blitz, which is my big concern. This Bills defense is playing really well, and they're doing a lot of the things effectively that the Bucs struggle with. So I don't like this matchup for this Bucs offense. You have to expect Tre'Davious White is going to be the guy getting the majority of the matchups on Mike Evans. I mean, frankly, the Bucs have to try and take advantage of that as well as White is playing. Evans has been fairly quiet these last few weeks. He's played some really good corners. That's no excuse. He needs to show up and take over a game. Sean Jackson, the Bucs just need to start hitting on that deep ball to him. You'd have to think the tight ends, once again, this is the mismatch that the Buccaneers should have in most games, and Cameron Brate's performed admirably. I don't know where the targets for OJ Howard are. Frankly, they should be having both of them out there running routes at times. They're not doing it enough, but I feel that is what this team can do in theory better than anyone, but it's not showed up on paper. But they really should have the beating of these linebackers. And that's really the one place I can look at, considering how the secondary is playing, say the Bucs should have a big advantage. Running the ball, I think, is going to be tough sledding against these guys. Doug Martin has looked really good in the few carries that he's managed to get over the last couple of games. But I just expect this Bills team is going to pretty much sell out, dare the Buccaneers to throw on them, and just try and get to the quarterback before he can release it and hope for some mistakes. It's worked for them pretty well thus far. They've been feasting on turnovers in the games they've succeeded, and the Bucs are very much a team capable of giving the ball away in numbers. It seems once that avalanche starts with the Bucs, it keeps on going. Going to be tough. If you're the Bucs, I just think you've got to do something to get this offense going early. I've mentioned before using the no huddle. Try and catch a team. You've got so many weapons that I think you need to try mixing around some groups. Find one that you like, go hurry up with it, and just try and get some momentum, because it's just been so stop-start all year, and they need to get Jameis into a rhythm, or Fitzpatrick if he's in. The receivers, they're not quite. It's not quite coming together on the outside. So if that's the case, move these guys about. Try and create some mismatches. Again, when you've got that many weapons, it should be doable, but it's not been there. There's been a real lack of creativity there, and I think if the Buccaneers can start adding some of those things, frankly, at this stage of the season, teams haven't seen it. They'd be surprised by it, you'd have to think. So that could really help. But that tight end matchup against these backers, particularly with how much this team blitzes, that should be big. You should be able to bait a few of these blitzes in and just get them sneaking into for easy gains over the middle of the field. Your backs are going to have to block well in this game. I've got no doubt there's going to be some free rushes coming at points from some of the blitz schemes that the Bills are going to use. I mean, the Bucs are going to have to pick their spot. The run game's going to be tough. They're going to have to stick with it. They've done a horrible job of being balanced this year. Being very quick to get away from the run game if it's not been successful early in a game. And, I don't like their chances if they end up really pass heavy. Like, this Bills team's going to get there, and I like their chances of causing a couple of turnovers. So if you're the Bucs, I think quick pace. Use some short passes. I don't know what I'd like a downfield pass attack as much as anyone, but I feel like there needs to be a bit more rhythm to this group. It's just not been there all year. Utilise the personnel that you've got, mix and match. Just try and attack weak spots. It just doesn't feel like that's been happening. And don't give up on the run. If they can do those things, then they should be able to put up some points there. I don't think they're necessarily going to need a huge amount of points to win this one, but just get going in the early game, see how things open up. But at the minute, it's been tough on them. If you're the Bills defensively, I think you just keep doing what you've been doing. You bring that blitz, stuff the run first and foremost. If you can keep this Bucs team one-dimensional, I think they're going to make mistakes. regardless, at this point in time, the Buccaneers haven't shown they can beat the blitz, so just keep doing that until they show you otherwise. You'll get some big plays out of it. You'll see this team stalling and going 3 and out regularly. So just do that. If the Bucs make you adjust, then adjust. But at this stage, that's all you have to do, I think, to have success. So for me, this game comes down to whether the Buccaneers can get this offense going. I'm really hoping this is the week. You all know I'm always going to pick the Buccaneers to win games, but I'm not feeling as confident about this one as I'd like because of the very, very high level that this Bills defense is playing to. And whilst this Bills offense isn't flashy, it's not exceptional, they play complementary football wonderfully well, and it makes this team really difficult to beat. And I imagine, particularly at home with the way the season started, the crowd's going to be pretty raucous for this one. But I'm thinking the Bucs maybe sneak this one out. They just need this game so badly. The AFC, I think, is going to be incredibly clustered in the middle. To me, there's not a huge amount of standout teams in that conference at the minute. Whereas I think in the NFC, you're going to see some of the better teams starting to rise to the top. The Bucs have to have this one, and I think they'll find a way to get this one late. So there you have it. As my thoughts on this one. As always, give us a shout. We've got the comment section below, the Cover Zero Facebook page. You can find me on Twitter at Simon Conboy. Always happy to talk football. As always, we're going to be doing the live stream on Tuesday. I think on Tuesday. It's usually Tuesday. Me, Arnie and Dan. Check that out. We'll cover all the games that occurred. Cover all the games for the following week. Always fun to do. We've got Bucs talk, Bucs banter and the Titans show coming up on Monday. Reviews, previews going up all the time. Check those out. If you could like, share, subscribe, check out the Patreon, it'd be grand. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Really do appreciate it. It's been a pleasure. Have a great weekend and go Bucs.